right? And as long as we're othered, society will engage us as the other and not see us as a Canadian who happens to be of the Sikh faith.
So based
Yeah,
on your experience, sorry, Sarah, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to say something. I completely agree with that because I remember even throughout in school, we don't learn a lot about Sikh people. And there's been loads of, triumphs and obstacles that people have had to deal with, especially people like yourself. And even learning about those pins and those shirts, like that's not even something I've seen before. And I can't speak for Daman, but just seeing that it hits you hard too.
Yeah. And that's where, and I have a whole bunch of different resources and stuff like that. But, this book, I remember when it comes to the concept of identity, this book by Sarojit Singh Jagpal, and it's out of print and not available to republish, but guess what? It's available online. And, today we're online doing the Zoominar. And if you just type this in, you'll see it in a PDF form, right? And why this is important is because when we're talking about identity, we actually have a dual responsibility. There's one in terms of the religious identity piece, and then there's one around what we call our national civic identity, that being Canadians, right? And, we have every right to walk around and feel proud as Canadians. In Alberta, there's a great colleague, Michael Hawley. I think you're aware of the research that he's doing. And, and some of the pictures, early pictures of pioneers and stuff like that, that exist in Alberta before Alberta became a province in of itself and its own constitution, right? So the formation of the province itself, you have us being pioneers there. And then here becomes that question: how come the term pioneer is never used to people who have my pigmentation or my identity? Right? Yet we were in the lumber mills and the sawmills and working in the cement quarries and on the railway and all those aspects. And so not only do we should be seen as Canadian every single day, this identity, we should also be seen as pioneers. That kind of language should also be attached to this identity. And so it becomes part of this challenge that you were talking about now is we didn't know. And so I think part of the sharing of Sikh Heritage Month and sharing of these types of resources can really empower ourselves to have a great sense of pride of who we are. Because can you imagine, I was like you in terms of going through schooling at that time, and this book came out after I finished university. So it wasn't easily as accessible as it is for all of you today, for any of us today. But can you imagine how empowered I can feel now walking the streets, knowing that this is what I call water cooler talk, social capital, right? That we're pioneers and we're going to define ourselves, and we'll share a history of us who helped build this country. We're nation builders, right? So that's a different language, a more empowering language of how we can speak to ourselves. Equally, another great book, Undesirables, Komagata and White Canada by Ali Kazemi, is a phenomenal resource, and I think it's available in a lot of library systems and stuff as well, right? To be able to access. One of the greatest things that Canada takes extensive pride in as Canadians is things like Vimy, the Battle of Vimy. I'm not sure if you guys know, or if a lot of the participants know that there were actually Sikh regiments that were attached and were hand in hand on the line with Canada at Vimy on the Great Battle, right? And so a great book that's produced actually by an Alberta company called Renegade, by Stephen Pirol from Indus Media out in Vancouver. Duty, Honor, Is It? Is a phenomenal resource and tale of our great valor in World War I and our military history. And again, this is great, what I call social capital, because it's not until you realize these types of stories and learning more that there was even Sikhs who fought for Canada in World War I while we were denied franchise, right? And while women were not allowed to join the men, and children are not allowed to come and join families, and yet we still fulfilled our duty in those aspects. And so I think a lot of these resources and knowledge of these stories can really start empowering us to have a great sense of pride of our heritage and our history. And it's not even just the past. I mean, look at within the political sphere. You know, I can never speak in Alberta without speaking of a late great dear friend, Manmeet, and how he inspired so many individuals with just how he carried himself within his role as a politician. Because you know, being a politician is just a career, just like for many other people. Being a doctor is just a career. Being a teacher is just a career. But it's how you can use that platform and really further a number of different causes and have some great integrity of how you carry yourself. And he was definitely one of those leads for us, and we always miss him dearly. But you have some great people doing some great work today as well. You have some great authors like Rupi Kaur. You know, just over my shoulder, there's Shauna Singh Baldwin. I'm not sure. You know, I know a lot of people in our community, especially females, love reading, right? And sometimes they have book clubs, or they speak to friends. And I wonder, you know, how many have actually known that we have a award-winning Canadian Sikh author, Shauna Singh Baldwin, right? And so whether you have What the Body Remembers, or English Lessons and Other Short Stories, which has a phenomenal short story called Montreal 1962 that I would recommend to everybody to find and access for sure. And you know, I talked about Rupi Kaur, you talked about Sharon Paul Ruparai, and many others, or whether it's children's literature, right? This book called Judah, or Panji, and it's a series of 4 books. There's also Basaki and stuff like that. So how can you create a sense of identity and support right from a young age right up to us, who will continue to engage these types of resources, to have a great sense of pride of who we are as Sikhs, who we are as Canadians, and in turn use that pride to engage in such a civic life that we can, because that's the advantage we have as with our identity, is that we're visible enough that any good we do can be expanded, and on the flip side, any negative can be equally as expanded, and we can be brushed with the whole thing as ourselves.
So you kind of answered my next question, but of course, education and awareness is a big part of feeling comfortable with your identity, to know what's happened and feel that sense of pride. But what other advice would you offer someone that's struggling with their identity as a visible minority, or with like facing adversity in their day-to-day lives, because racism does still exist?
No, and definitely, and it's where I spend a lot of my time professionally in the work that I do to address you know, racism, sexism, anti-homophobia, being differently abled, and you know, and I apologize to everybody, because I'll be remiss if we don't first of all acknowledge that we're holding this Zoom meeting, and as settlers on this land, on the lands of the First Nations people of Canada, who continue to be caretakers and ambassadors of the land we're on. And you know, it's understanding those aspects when we're talking about identity, that we're not unique with respect to our identity. We know that there's been challenges within the history of Canada around identity. We know there's still legal battles to be fought. There's social battles to be fought with respect to our identity. And the first thing I would let people, I would want to tell people is, you're not alone, right? Because sometimes people internalize it and make it so personal, right? And so to let people know that many of us have and will continue to go through these challenges and struggles, and that it's something that you accept, and recognize that the battle is the ignorance. The battle is racism. And that when you can empower yourself in saying that I'm willing to stand up and challenge this, then you will have a better chance to be able to deal with some of these aspects. Reaching out and talking to people is critically important as well, because you don't want to so-called struggle alone. There's no need for that. And it's a journey, right? And sometimes you're feeling a certain way around your identity, and our faith identity is just one aspect. We have a pigmentation, that's another aspect. There can be intersectionalities of it, right? So you can be experiencing other things as part of your identity that intersect with these aspects that we're talking about. But it's something that a lot of people do struggle with, and also encounter. And so if there's any young person that's even listening right now, if they look at me and knowing all the different types of roles I played and things I've done, I know that I still will experience racism. My education is not going to make me immune. My income is not going to make me immune, right? My articulation in language is not going to make me immune. And so I'd be naive to think that going forward that I will not experience racism. So racism, as bad as it sounds, is a fact of life, right? And when you can accept it as a fact of life and then find out what your responsibility is and how you can be honored and have a sense of pride in terms of your identity, that's when things start shifting. And so first of all, know that you're not alone. Reach out, talk to friends, talk to peer groups. Today we have access online and stuff. I'm a public figure. If anybody ever wants to contact me, they just need to really literally type in my name. I have a website, it's Pardeep.ca. My telephone number, personal number is right there. That's the first thing that appears. And for any of these pieces, when it comes to these issues, by all means, even for someone like me, I'm always available if someone needs to reach out around identity. But I think when I was talking about some of these resources and sharing those pieces, there's so many layers to our identity, right? Because our family is part of our identity. And in Rupi Kaur's The Sun and Flowers, I encourage everybody to read the poem Broken English, right? And there's so many different other aspects where she talks about that concept of identity, right? And so identity has many layers to it, but it's something that we need to and we should embrace, because the last thing is to change who we are for somebody else.
Awesome. So you're obviously a public figure. You've dabbled in a lot of different work. What has been the primary motivation to do the work that you do, and who or what has inspired you to become a leader and inspire such amazing change within the community, regardless of the obstacles that you have faced?
That's a loaded question in terms of, because I have and I'll continue to find inspiration. First and foremost, I think because I present myself with the identity of the Sikh, my faith is an important foundation. I had the chance, as we're still celebrating the full year of the 550th